As I'm sure most of you know by now, according to Iran state media, Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi, the country's foreign minister Hussein Amir Abdulah have died in a helicopter crash. There are a number of questions that this unfortunate turn of events presents. Was this simply an unfortunate accident as their helicopter traveled in dense fog along Iran's border with Azerbaijan? Was the helicopter taken down? What's next for Iran? What's next for the region?
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon. I'm Wilmer Leon. You know, we have a tendency to view current events as though they occur in a vacuum, failing to understand the broader historical context in which most events take place. During each episode of this program, my guests and I have probing, provocative, and in-depth discussions that connect the dots between the events and the broader historic context in which they occur. This enables you to better understand and analyze these events that impact the global village in which we live. For insight into these issues, let's go to Beirut, Lebanon, and my guest. He's an award-winning broadcaster and independent journalist based in Beirut, Lebanon. He is a policy consultant with the Community Media Advocacy Center, and you can find him and his work at freepalestine.video. He's Laith Marouf Laith, as always. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
So let me start with who was former President Ibrahim Raisi? The Western media describes him in less than glowing terms as a religious hardliner. He's seen as a potential successor to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. He was a former judge and allegedly a member of what the West calls the Death Commission, which forcibly disappeared and extrajudicially executed in secret thousands of political dissidents. Those are the allegations. Who was former President Ibrahim Raisi?
Well, definitely he was part of the first generation that lived the Islamic Revolution and were on the front lines during the massacres that Iraq and the West commissioned in Iran, the use of chemical weapons against Iranians paid for by the Germans and the US. So he has that credential of living that revolution, and he was a judge, and the accusations that keep on being repeated there of thousands of prisoners being executed, we're talking about the terrorists that are part of the Mujahideen Khalq, the MEK terrorist organization that was housed in Iraq and funded by the West and is now housed in Albania, that was responsible for the killing of almost 70,000 people in Iran through their terror campaign. That includes the killing of ministers and government officials at the time. So, you know, the accusation against him is that he crushed the vessels, the terrorists that work for the CIA. That's his accusation against him. You know, otherwise he was a judge and very respected within the country because of this background, actually. Whatever accusation that the West has against him as a discrediting thing, in reality, it is a positive thing for his reputation in Iran because of how he defended Iran against the terrorists. The hype that we saw over the last month or so in the media about Raisi being going to be the next Ayatollah after Khamenei steps down, and that there is no truth to that in terms of any speaking of that in Iranian society or Iranian media. In fact, we should take it as an indicator of that he was going to be assassinated. There's something that Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, after the assassination of General Soleimani in 2020 by Trump, he, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah in a speech, he spoke about how when the media in the West suddenly gives attention to a leader in the region out of the blue and start giving them very high stature that is maybe true, but it's not, that's an indicator of an assassination coming. And that he spoke to General Soleimani the day before he was assassinated while he was in Beirut about that, and warned him as he was flying to Baghdad on a domestic flight that this is actually even more worrisome, that he was on a domestic flight given all this attention. So now we see kind of the same thing happening here. All this hype being pumped about Raisi in the month before the assassination, specifically since the retaliation of Iran against the assassination of its diplomats in Damascus. So I see it as actually an indicator that he was going to be assassinated, and now that's what actually happened.
To your point that this was an assassination, there are a couple of things that, as soon as I heard that the helicopter went down, that that came to mind. One was it taken down? Apparently, there were 3 helicopters flying in formation, and his helicopter was one of the 3. And it seems as though it just dropped out of the sky. They keep talking about the terrain. They keep talking about the fog. I know some U.S. military trained helicopter pilots, certified helicopter pilots. The first thing I did was call them and ask them, when you heard fog, when you heard terrain, when you heard the helicopter went down, I said, what's the first thing that came to your mind? They all said, oh, they took that thing out the sky. And they said, first of all, they all said to me, as certified pilots, we would never have crashed our helicopter. That just was not going to happen. Short of some catastrophic mechanical failure, they said, which, by the way, we are trained to deal with. They told me the quality of pilots that they have in Iran, that those pilots, they say this goes all the way back to when Iran was an ally of the United States during the Shah's time, and that the protocols that were in place then are many of the same protocols that they follow today. So there was a lot of information or opinion that they gave to me, which said, and then they even mentioned you got to understand the MEK along that region, that Azerbaijan is an ally of Israel, or that there are elements within Azerbaijan that are. So connect some of those dots for me, please. Are these just the opinions of ill-informed individuals, or they said for the fact that the thing dropped out the sky without even a Mayday call indicates that something was wrong here?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a lot of important things.
Okay.
So first off, obviously, there was no Mayday call, as you said. So we don't have any information about some problem happening on the helicopter. The other is that there was 2 other helicopters with it, and they continued to reach their target and destination, and they reached it. That's a question also. Why didn't they stop and fly back and look for the other helicopter? That's a big indicator that there's something wrong that happened there, that is not just a regular crash. The other thing is that the Iranian government took a very long time to really, show us what happened and tell us that Raisi and his companions were dead. In fact, hours after the crash, the Minister of Internal Security told the whole world that they received 2 calls from survivors on the plane, on the helicopter. And later on, all the way around 2 a.m. Tehran time, Again, the Minister of Internal claimed that they received a call from one of the crew members on the helicopter all the way that late, saying that they were hearing the ambulances or the sirens in the area. So, while all of this was happening, the minute the helicopter crash was announced and called a soft landing, and then it took so long. I mean, this is Iran that has satellites. This is Iran that has drones that can fly and reach Israel and hit their targets thousands of kilometers away. I thought in my mind that either from the first minute that Raisi and his team were assassinated and they're dead, and the Iranians were delaying the announcement so they can, tidy up their house and prepare for the transition and think about what they want to do if there's an actual assassination, and or that the Iranians were hiding the fact that he was alive and they were just milking it for support. This is what I thought during the whole night as they were doing this search. And obviously for them to finally tell us they're dead, that's in me confirmed that there was an assassination. Okay. None of the stories that came from the Iranian government to the media during the quote-unquote search made any sense. And so now we know they're killed. I believe the Iranian government knows that they were killed and how they were killed. And I think given the fact that the Israelis have a tendency of assassinating political leaders as retaliation for their failures on the battlefield. This is historic. Look at how, even recently, look at how they assassinated Hamas leadership in Beirut because they were failing on the ground in Gaza. And they failed in the battle with Iran after they targeted the embassy in Damascus. And Iran, landed a huge blow on them, and they were not able to retaliate. So their only, usual behavior is to assassinate political leaders, and that's what we saw. The question is, because Netanyahu attempted last month when attacking the embassy to drag the United States into a war because he sees Israel losing the battle on the ground. He sees that Israel cannot even fight Hezbollah if a bigger war starts with Lebanon. He needs the United States to be down on the battlefield with him. He wanted to drag Iran into that war with the attack on the embassy, and they didn't retaliate in a way that created a war. And now he did this to try to drag again Iran into this war. But this is not what Iran wants. Iran has a clear plan with the axis of resistance that we're seeing unfold over the last 7 months, which is to chisel away at Israel slowly and, cook it like a frog, a live frog boiling, okay, where it collapses internally, where all its support from the world collapses externally, and there's no need for a war for this Zionist colony to collapse. But Netanyahu wants a war. So I think the Iranians are not going to admit that this is an assassination, because if they admit it's an assassination, they have no choice but to carpet bomb the hell out of the Zionist colony. And that would derail the plan and will take it to the stage that Netanyahu wants it. So I think they're going to just bite the bullet and continue on their set plan, and will not be dragged into. It's very sad. I mean, it's very sad. This is is going to be what's going to happen. But that's the only path forward I see. Otherwise, if Iran decides to retaliate, we're going to be in World War III immediately.
And I think it's important for people to understand that there's a much longer term vision here. That the axis of resistance, they have a different worldview. We know that if the situation were reversed and either if somebody had shot Netanyahu's plane out the sky, or if this had happened to Tony Blinken while he was traveling in the region, that the bombs would be exploding by now. But I think there are economic concerns here that those in the region are taking into account. War, as I said in Godfather, war is messy business. War is very expensive. And with their economies under sanction, with their now finding ways to move and operate without the sanctions, to go into a war right now, whether it's the Russian economy, whether it's the Chinese economy, whether it's the Iranian economy, they don't want that economic stress on their economies. They also know that I think going into a world war, which is, or at least a regional conflict, would shut off oil transport through both the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf, which would then collapse the world economy. They don't want to do that. I don't think I'm conflating their concern for world welfare. I think they're looking much longer. Am I connecting some dots here?
Yes, you definitely are. And although most of the axis of resistance and China, Russia, and most of Africa and Latin America want to see an end to American imperialism, no one wants the whole world to burn in the process. Okay, it's no one's interest to have a world war. People want to clip the wings of the United States, bring it back to its natural size, and the same thing for Europe, and balance humanity. There's no interest in these countries to see the United States burn and Europe become a wasteland. And so there's the difference. The difference is people in the South and the East just want the foot of America off their neck. Mm-hmm. They don't want to put their own foot on America's neck. And so we will see, as we're seeing right now, both in the battlefield in Ukraine, or what's happening around Taiwan, or what's happening here right now in the Western Asia battlefield, is the constant attempt by the axis of resistance and others around the world to take things slow, to allow time to be the biggest weapon. Okay,
hence the adage, you have the watches, we have the time. So with all of this, what's next for Iran?
Yeah, I mean, we already know that they have to have an election within 50 days. That was announced yesterday, and the current vice president was appointed as temporary president until elections happen. Iran, as a constitutional democracy, will fill these positions as fast as possible. Even though these individuals leave a huge gap behind them because of their knowledge and portfolios. Abdullahian being the youngest foreign affairs minister of Iran's history, and because of his relations in Africa and Latin America, and Raisi with the relationships that he built. So we're should expect that this is going to happen, this election. But look at one thing: the Israelis at least got what they got from this is at least now a distraction for the next 3-5 days in Iran and world news, while they intensify the massacres in Gaza and in the West Bank. Last night, for instance, eight people were killed in Jenin. So Palestinians. So there's a lot that we can't really predict what's going to happen. The other thing is that it's very possible that Iran, although they don't announce that this was an assassination and that they don't put the finger on Israel, that they actually conduct clandestine actions that are in kind, and something nasty happens to some Israeli official, and nobody can say who it is. So those are possibilities, but I think the most probable thing is that Iran will try to stay the course, that the support fronts in Lebanon and Yemen will intensify rapidly to a different level.
Okay? That's my next question. What happens in the region?
Yes, yes. So we're already like seeing an intensification. Even before this assassination, we had change in the tactics on the Lebanese front, with Hezbollah conducting multi-layered, complex operations that include drones, guided missiles, and achieving huge hits, destroying much of the air defenses that Israel has, downing two huge surveillance balloons. One of them is the biggest in the world, this Zeppelin balloon. There's only two of them in the Zionist colony, one around the Daimuna reactor, one in the north, and the Israelis had put this one in the north because of the destruction of all of their surveillance equipment on the border with Lebanon. So to see Hezbollah not only down these drones, but also film the after from, not only down these balloons, but also film with surveillance drones after effect of the destruction, and coming back with their images, 100% high HD 4K images of the, so we're already past into a new stage now in Lebanon, and I expect it to only intensify. And similarly with Yemen, I think that in the next 24 hours, we will see Yemen starting to attack shipping in the Mediterranean. And that will add another sea under Yemeni sovereignty. It's not only going to be the Red Sea, the Arabian Sea, and the Indian Ocean. You'll have also the Mediterranean. And that will be the smartest thing that Iran can do with the axis of resistance, is to intensify the battle on these fronts without addressing the issue of the assassination of Raisi.
When we look at the recent dynamics, and what I mean by that is, if we go back to October 7th, well, in fact, not even that. What I mean is, China gets involved with the Saudis. The Saudis wind up talking to Iran. There's rapprochement between Iran and the Saudis. Haven't heard much from the Crown Prince bin Salman in all of these most recent developments. Are there things coming out of Saudi Arabia that are not being reported in the West, particularly now as it relates to the death of former President Raisi? And is bin Salman concerned about his longevity?
I think everybody is right now worried about their longevity. We've seen, the assassination attempt on the Czech president. So we saw like the attempted coup. All of this within 24 hours in Congo. Again, American-Israeli mercenaries trying to overthrow the president of the Congo. So we're right now entering a new stage in the global battle, not only in Western Asia. We're seeing the West do the maximum they can with the hybrid war. So it's not only a media war, it's not only sanctions war, it's not only direct confrontations or military confrontations. We're seeing these assassinations and coups and so on intensified by the United States and its vassal states. So the Saudis issued an official statement, condolences to Iran on the assassination. In fact, all of the Gulf countries, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Emirate, Oman, Saudi, all of them sent their condolences. There is 3 days of mourning in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, in Pakistan, in India, and in Tajikistan, and in Turkey. And this is like things that are unheard of. It's maybe it was expected that Syria or Iraq, but yeah, Lebanon and Pakistan and Turkey. So we can see that the whole region is worried about the results of this assassination, What does it also mean to, what are the rules of the game now? What is allowed to be done? Because if you are allowed to assassinate presidents, now means there's no rules. It's, so
let me
yes.
just quickly say to that point, that reminds me of a comment that President Putin made maybe a year ago, as people were talking about, oh, is Russia going to assassinate the president of Ukraine? And Putin said no. He said, no, we don't do that. So people need to understand that there's I hate to use it, there's a decorum, there's a protocol. There are certain things you're not supposed to do, even in the rules of war, even in warfare. You don't assassinate the leader of your opposing country. So you're making that comment just made me think about the point that
by the way, President Putin is on the way right now on the flight to Tehran, and he's flying with escorts of Sukhoi 35s to Tehran, and he will be there tomorrow during the funeral procession led by the Ayatollah. So
what does that signal? That's, in my mind, that's huge. Because that's huge on a couple of fronts. One, his country is in the midst of a conflict with NATO / the United States / the West. So he must feel incredibly comfortable to leave, as he did when he went to China. In the midst of this conflict, I can leave my country. I'm not concerned about A, being assassinated. I'm not concerned about something happening domestically. B, he's flying into a war zone. He's flying into a country whose president was just killed, many believe assassinated. So on a number of fronts, that to me speaks volumes.
Yes, and there's the ICC arrest warrant against
that too,
International Criminal Court. So where we know that yesterday, the minute the announcement was made that the crash happened, the President Putin called in the ambassador of Iran to Moscow into almost a 6-hour meeting with all the heads of the intelligence, military, and foreign affairs of Russia. It was like a special, kind of war council almost, right? And we don't know what happened in this meeting, right? So what information did Russia share with Iran? What are their points that were made in that meeting? And immediately we see this visit by President Putin being confirmed, and he's flying over the Caspian Sea directly into Iran from Russian territory to Iranian territory with the military escorts. We will clearly that this indicates a lot of things, and he's flying with him the top cadre of the Russian military and intelligence and foreign affairs to Iran. So there's something that's going to happen there. We don't know what's the exchange that's going to happen in these meetings. And to go back to the issue of assassinations, the Axis of Resistance members have never assassinated any Israeli leadership, not because they can't. This is, in fact, the only time that there was any assassination of an Israeli official is the Minister of Settlements during the Second Intifada in 2002, was conducted by the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine in retaliation for the assassination of the leader of the PLFP, Abu Ali Mustafa, when the Israelis fired a missile from a helicopter into his official office. So historically, the Axis of Resistance does not do assassinations like this. Why? Because number one, and this is true for Russia, by the way, number one, our enemies don't have any heroes. Okay, they only got lunatics, stupid leaders, and if you kill them, you create them martyrs. right?
Mhm.
The Israelis,
You
the
elevate them,
Ukrainians,
you inflate them to an
yes,
artificial sense of value and power.
exactly. So there's no need to create martyrs for the Ukrainians or the Israelis. These are all ghouls. They should never be allowed to reach that status of martyrdom. The second issue, and this is true again for Ukraine, is because we're gifted as an axis of resistance, and Russia is gifted with the stupidest kind of enemy. Okay? Why would you want to kill Zelensky if he's so dumb? Okay, or Netanyahu, who's making so many stupid mistakes? If you kill them, maybe somebody smarter will come. You'll be even cursed. And in fact, if you look at the Israelis assassinating over and over leaderships in the axis of resistance, every time they assassinated somebody, somebody even more cunning and more ready to fight them gets into the position. Look at Hezbollah. Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah came into his position as Secretary General after the assassination by Israel of Sayyid al-Musawi, the former first Secretary General of Hezbollah, who was very moderate, soft-spoken, and then you get Nasrallah, and look at what. So assassinations don't work on those two grounds. Okay, so it's a stupid thing that the Israelis did this assassination of Sayyid Raisi, and it's just gonna bring somebody more in power. And now Iran has a president as a martyr on the path of liberation of Palestine. What glory does Iran have? No other nation lost a president in defense of Palestine, not even the Palestinian Authority. You see?
You know, one of you're laying out that logic also goes back to some fundamental organizational constructs, as in organizations that are personality led versus organizations that are structurally led. So what I understand you to be saying is that this resistance is not based upon the personality in charge, that there is a structure here, there is an ideology here that, as we've said a number of times on a number of shows, you can't kill an ideology with a military. You can only defeat an ideology with a better ideology. And
Yes.
so you can assassinate all the leaders you want to, but there are people right behind them that are waiting to take charge.
Yes, it's institutionalized. Obviously, we don't want to undermine the human factor, right? Like a human factor is very important in all of these things, and people's personalities and connections make a difference. And so, yes, these losses are always big, but because of this institutionalization, hopefully and because of the actual human factor, this new person that will fill will bring new openings, new connections with them. So yes, the human factor is very important, and institutionalization is as important.
Switching gears a bit, the ICC, the International Criminal Court, is seeking arrest warrants for the leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, as well as the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, on charges of war crimes, crimes against humanity. And it seems to be centered around the October 7th retaliation by Hamas on Israel. President Biden has denounced as, quote unquote, outrageous the request for these warrants. Biden has said, let me be clear, whatever this prosecutor might imply, there is no evidence, none, between Israel and Hamas. Biden said that this is a false equivocation. A couple of things. One, people need to understand that the ICC, the prosecutor, is seeking arrest warrants. No warrants have been issued yet. I also find it interesting that they are tying all of this back to the October 7th response by the resistance, as though October 7th is actually the beginning of something as opposed to the continuation of something. And then I'd like to get your take on, as I understand international law, the actions taken by Hamas on October 7th do not violate international law because Hamas represents the occupied, Israel is the occupier, and in international law, the occupied can do anything in its power to resist occupation. There is no right to defend oneself when you are the occupier. Laith Marouf, your thoughts on that analysis?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that you said, and I would add to it. Can you imagine if during the Vietnam War, Vietnam was and the Vietnamese resistance were taken to the International Criminal Court and their leadership were declared terrorists for defending themselves against French and British and American occupation, or the Algerian resistance being called terrorists at the ICC for defending themselves against the massacres of the French, or the French resistance against the Nazis. Okay.
Or the ANC in South Africa.
Or the ANC. So I personally think the collaborationist Palestinian Authority on purpose launched this case at the ICC, okay, because they wanted the leadership of the resistance in Hamas to be charged with war crimes, okay? And
wait. Start that again, because man, you I never saw that one coming. Start that one again, please.
Yes. I know it's sometimes hard for people to make these connections, but you see, there's never.
That's
been
why you're on connecting the dots.
Yes, there's never been in history international criminal court case of the occupied, taking their occupier into court and the occupied being charged with crimes against their occupier. So and it was the Palestinian Authority that pursued this case, okay? And I think it was done on purpose by Abbas and his
Mahmoud Abbas did this.
By Mahmoud Abbas and his collaborationist goons to dirty the reputation of the resistance, to make their resistance equal to the crimes of the occupier. Okay, and I add to it even more. These arrest warrants against Netanyahu and Gantz, who's gonna actually enforce them? No Western country will stop Netanyahu from flying over its airspace or landing on its territory. That's for sure, 100%. But you know who's going to be a target? It's Ismail Haniyeh, who's sitting in Qatar, right? Sinwar and Al-Daif are in Gaza. The Israelis can't even kill them or assassinate them. They can't reach them, let alone try to arrest them for ICC charges. But Ismail Haniyeh, the head of Hamas in Foreign Political Bureau, is now the #1 target. He's probably right now running to find a place that he can hide other than Qatar, because Qatar is a vassal state and they will hand him over to the Americans at any moment. Okay, so in reality, this is one of the worst things that ever happened to the Palestinians, this ICC case. There's nothing to celebrate about it. Okay, and if you notice the limitations of this case, that it only, as you said, starts October 7th.
They don't mention genocide.
Okay, and not only that, the case is only for crimes inside Gaza. None of the historical Palestine, West Bank, East Jerusalem, any of that will be included in this. And this is not only to protect Israel from accusations of apartheid and the settlement building that is one of the biggest war crimes possible, but also to hide the fact that all these internment camps that have been built since October 7th where thousands of Palestinians from the Gaza Strip were abducted and sent into these Abu Ghraibs, into these Guantanamos, and being tortured, raped, and killed en masse, disappeared completely because nobody even knows that they're in these. And the fact that Ben Gvir turned all the Israeli prisons into that same model, 12,000 Palestinian prisoners since October 7th have been living in these internment camps, tortured, raped, and killed, with hundreds of testimonies of rape and torture by men, women, and children coming out of these dungeons. And and if you notice the docket of these requests for arrest warrants, this house slave, Khan, who is a puppet of the United States and Israel, who came as a replacement to the ICC chief prosecutor before him, who got humiliated and death threats and banned from entering the United States and so on, because she even thought about
even his family was under.
Yes. So now what does this guy do? If you look at the charges, when he's talking about Hamas quote unquote crimes, he speaks of them as if they're facts. That rapes happen. We have no evidence of any rape.
Well,
that babies were killed. No evidence.
No evidence.
Of babies killed. But when he talks about the crimes of the Zionists,
wait a minute. To that point, going back to President Putin, I remember him saying, if you have evidence of these crimes, please show the world. He was very emphatic on that point. You have made these allegations. If you have evidence, please show the world. And no matter how many times Joe Biden, no matter how many times Tony Blinken wants to talk about these atrocities, they've never even Piers Morgan. I know you saw the interview with Dr. Morandi and Piers Morgan, where Morandi just cut him a new one. He said, Piers, where's the evidence? And Piers Morgan just kept chatting, just kept chirping. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes. I mean, the evidence is like, you have to take the word of the chosen people for fact. What are you, anti-Semitic, Wilmer? You don't believe every word that comes out of a chosen person mouth? I mean, that's it. That's all the evidence you need. So
if I was anti-Semitic, I wouldn't be talking to you.
Exactly. So, but we're joking about it, but truly, like, this guy, this sock puppet, Khan, he went down to Israel after October 7th and sat down with the families and quote unquote survivors and visited the colonies that were attacked, but refused to enter Gaza. Hamas opened the door for him, invited him to come and see to evidence the war crimes. He refused to go to Gaza. Okay. And then now he's coming and he's writing in his docket that these crimes happened by Hamas. But when he's talking about the crimes, accusations against Israel, he says reasonable grounds before every accusation. So he is already, you could see how tainted this case is and what is its ultimate goal. I mean, yesterday, the spokesperson for the American government, I can't remember his name, the thin white guy.
Yeah.
He was being interviewed, asked in the question period about this issue. And the guy claimed that, the Palestinians have no right to go to the ICC and that their only courts that have jurisdiction are Israeli or American courts. He wants the Palestinians to come and beg at American courts, which even shows you how Israel is a colony, a vassal of the United States. But yes, this is where...
Is that Matthew Miller?
Yes, Matthew Miller, and people call him Matthew Killer. Yes,
right,
yes.
Matthew Miller.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You're saying he was saying that they need to come to American courts.
Yes, that they have no right to go to the ICC, and the only place that has jurisdiction is the U.S. or Israel over crimes in Gaza.
Which is also very telling, in that the United States is not a signatory to the ICC, but seems to want to either use it when it's convenient or condemn it when it's convenient. But in fact, there's a standing American law, and people can look this up, that if an American is brought before The Hague, the United States reserves the right to invade it.
Yeah.
I might even be called the Hague Invasion Act. I'm drawing a blank on the name, but people, folks, you need to look this up. The United States has a standing American law saying we will invade The Hague if an American is arrested and held accountable for crime.
Yes, it's colloquially known as the Hague Invasion Act.
Okay.
And, in fact, if you look at the ICC record, 42 out of the 42 people that were convicted of crimes at the ICC were African leaders.
Right.
And and then add to it that the charges against President Putin. So, this ICC is the most captured UN affiliated organism, captured by the West, along with the International Atomic Energy Organization and the Chemical and Weapons Organization. These are like the least trusted three organs of the UN. And we're seeing, I believe these indictments, or if there is an arrest warrant issued, I don't see anything good coming to the Palestinians from this.
Wow, that's a perspective and a level of analysis that I did not see coming. But what you're saying makes sense. Bring us up to date, please, on what's happening in Rafah. According to the New Arab, there are about 1.4 million Palestinians there, and that around the 7th of May, they were told that they had to leave. And the number I see is about 80,000 people have fled. But there's, I guess, a slow boiling Israeli incursion into the area. What's going on in Rafah now?
Yeah, the Israelis are doing what they call fire belts. It's like bombardment by, from the land, from the sea, from the air, on straight lines, and then going next straight line and so on. This is what they've been doing since last week. They haven't yet attempted invading Rafah. They have been stuck in Jabalia since last week in the longest and fiercest battle on the ground of Gaza since the beginning of the war. The Israelis lost, according to their own media, at least 10 officers there. That includes a field general, the highest ranking military officer on the field of any army, and along with all his commanders. So we've seen the videos come out from this Jabalia battle. Every day, like 2-3 videos coming out from Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and others that showed us tens of Israeli tanks destroyed, APCs and bulldozers. So they're receiving a beating, a whipping in the battlefield of Jabalia. So I don't think they're going to invade Rafah anytime soon. They'll continue bombing from the air. But this has also happened at the same time as yesterday or the day before, the Americans finished building the pier.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we already now have images of this pier. with American air defenses, radars, and tanks and APCs waiting in the landing ships. So clearly, this fear is not about delivering any aid, and it's definitely not about the mass expulsion of Palestinians. This is an invasion beachfront landing zone in the case of total collapse of the Israeli military on the battlefield, and that's what we're seeing right now happening.
And is it a coincidence, or should we connect dots that the pier was completed right around the same time that it was announced that, what was it, $1.2 billion more of weaponry has been approved? And so is that a coincidence, or am I wrong to connect these dots?
No, it's not a coincidence. It's also not a coincidence that it was finished the day they assassinated Raisi. You see, all of these are timed things. The same thing, it's not a coincidence that the sock puppet Khan announced the ICC arrest warrants at the same day of the assassination. So all of this is clearly timed together, and we now saw in the last 48 hours the cards of the West put on the table, open now their hand. They just opened their hand with these three moves.
But wait a minute, President Biden is calling for a ceasefire. How can this be true, Laith Marouf, when President Biden, when he was at Morehouse giving his commencement address, he's calling for a ceasefire? Help me understand this, because obviously you didn't hear him, and so now that you understand Joe Biden wants a ceasefire, how can everything that you've just said be true?
Isn't it one of the most disgusting things that Biden could do is to lie to the Black students and the administration of the university, say that he will not use their Black faces in his promotional materials for his election? That was one of the conditions to allow him to speak to the students who were going to demonstrate, but because their administration found a middle ground and told them, okay, you can demonstrate without
don't make any noise,
don't make any noise, and so on. And this guy is not going to use your faces for his election. And now he goes around and immediately releases a promotional video abusing these students to try to get sympathy from the Black communities in America. This is, and obviously, anybody that believes American leaders should go and ask the indigenous people about all the treaties and their promises. I mean, there's 400 years of record of broken promises and broken treaties. There's not one treaty I think the United States ever abided by with anyone.
Have you seen this Washington Post article from last week? The Washington Post reported about a WhatsApp chat stream where New York Mayor Eric Adams was chatting with a number of American multi-million and billionaires, such as the former founder of Starbucks and the CEO of Dell and a number of other financiers, where they were demanding that Eric Adams send the NYPD into Columbia University. They offered campaign contributions. They offered to fund private investigators to look into the students. And he is now, of course, denying that this took place. But the Washington Post has the transcript of the WhatsApp communications, and they named these individuals by name. And it seems as though their whole concern or motivation behind this is they're losing control of the narrative. Your thoughts, Laith Marouf?
Yeah, I mean, it's 100% a fact that this happened, no matter what the mayor says, who was another sock puppet, And if me and you have enough money. We can buy American politicians if we want to. They're very cheap. They'll sell you their mamas if you have enough money. Okay, so it's not a surprise. It's actually great that it got leaked, and I'm sure the Washington Post only published it because it was gonna be all around the internet anyways, and they needed to have a scoop, to stay on top of the story. But this is the truth. The political class and the economic elite are abusing the police in the United States, abusing the power they have over the police, forcing the police to become political police, to suppress the students and the communities that are demonstrating for the liberation of Palestine. I mean, I watched these images over the weekend. The beatings that the NYPD was giving to these youth was, very similar
who were
to
peacefully protesting,
being jumped and taken to the ground and punching women in the face while having your legs on their necks. I mean, it's very similar to how they treat on a daily basis the Black community, specifically Black men. But now we're seeing it on a daily scale of people not like being accused of any crime, of just speaking out or demonstrating. And that's what was happening to the Black community in the 60s and the 70s, and or the Black Lives Matter movement during the Obama years. Now we are gearing up to this summer of discontent all across the West as these youth finish their exams in the universities and pour into the streets. And we should expect maximum suppression from the political class, and they will be abusing the police to do so, because they can't use the courts. Look, in Canada, there's been now 2 court cases where Zionist students went to court to try to force the police to remove a student encampment from McGill University in Montreal. McGill University is the Ivy League university in Canada. And they lost. The judge said, no, the students have a right. And then the university administration itself appealed and went to the court to also ask the court to tell the police to remove the students. And again, the court said no. And therefore, this is what's happening. The Zionists in Canada were stupid enough to think that they can win this in court. They thought like, oh, we have all the media, we have all the politicians, we can rip apart the Bill of Rights in Canada. Okay, but the Zionists in the United States are a little bit smarter. They know that if they go to court, First Amendment, they cannot remove these students. Therefore, they skipped all the legal process and went immediately into abusing their access to power by moving the police, setting them like dogs on the students.
Laith Marouf, my brother, as always, I got to thank you for joining me today, and let me reiterate to folks that they need to go to freepalestine.video. Go to freepalestine.video. You can see, if you could quickly just explain to the audience what you're doing there on the ground, real time in Beirut with freepalestine.video.
So yeah, it's a volunteer community television. We're teaching youth and students to produce content in English. We're also doing everyday, almost, reporting from the south of Lebanon, from the war front, exclusive coverage of what's happening there, interviews of people on the ground, and we're doing weekly episode of a special show called Wartime Cafe with the biggest intellectual and political leaders in Lebanon in English. You've seen, last time, the last episode of Wartime Cafe was with Ibrahim al-Musawi, who is a member of parliament, but also the former spokesperson for Hezbollah. He hasn't spoken in English media for a long time. So this is the kind of content that you will get. Please support us, donations. We need membership if there's possible. so people subscribe for monthly donation, that would be amazing. And you can, on our website, freepalestine.video, you have the links to all our socials, so Twitter, Telegram, Instagram, YouTube, Rumble. Please watch the content and help us through donations.
My brother, my dear brother, Laith Marouf, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Look forward to having you back. Folks, thank you all so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. Stay tuned for new episodes every week. Also, please follow and subscribe. Please leave a review, share the show, and you can follow us on social media. You'll find all the links below to the show description. Contribute to this effort if you can. Nothing is too small, and we know nothing is too large. We greatly, greatly appreciate the contributions that are helping to keep this program on the air. Remember, this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge, because talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. See you again next time. Until then, I'm Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a great one. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.